The following program, Norml Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting norml.org, Norml.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of Norml Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of Norml. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents Norml Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, Norml's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. It is Monday, August 15th, 2011, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for our show. This next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. We've got all sorts of changes going on in the studio here. Sitting in the John seat, who would normally be running the board. I'm running the board today, but we've got our lovely and talented cannabis Carrie right here in the studio. Welcome, Carrie.
In a panic, I just swallowed my gum, so I didn't know where to spit it. I'm sorry.
Well, Carrie brings us our hemp headlines right after the first break, so what do we got in the news today?
Well, today we're going to talk about Maine getting their very first dispensary and how that's going. We're also going to go to what Rolling Stone dubbed Stonerville, USA, to see what's happening in that city in the nation. And the agricultural department from California has some interesting ideas on what marijuana actually is. We actually got a court ruling today to find out what it isn't.
Okay, that'll be very interesting, especially considering our guest in the studio today. I'm sure he'll have something to say about that in hour two. Also on today's show, I wanted to let you know, Wiz Khalifa and Ganja John are road tripping down to California along with Cannabis Cure UK. They were harassed and accosted by the man last night. Not just the man, 5 separate police cars, 3 county, 2 city, or 3 city, 2 county, don't remember which. But you can check it out on their Twitter feeds, at Wiz Khalifa and at Ganja John and at Cannabis Cure UK. They're talking all about it, and with luck, they'll call in hour 2 and tell us all about Khalifa being profiled, apparently. This is an amazing story. We'll get to that as soon as we can. Also, today is Roots Monday, so we've got some reefer jazz for you. Our own Cannabob brings us some video from the reefer man, Cab Calloway, with Reefer Man. It's going to be a great video. And then at 1:30, a real treat. We are beginning today our legalization week. It's kind of like Shark Week, but a whole lot mellower. Legalization week here on Norml Show Live, where we're going to talk to the proponents of legalization initiatives in 4 different states. Today we begin with my home state of Oregon. Jen Alexander from the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act will be here. Leland Berger from Sensible Oregon will be on the phone. And Robert Wolf from the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative will be here as well. So we'll be here talking about legalization in Oregon. On tomorrow's show, we'll start talking about legalization in the state of California with Dale Sky Jones from Oaksterdam University, also talking about their expansion into Michigan. On Wednesday, we are going to have proponents from Colorado's legalization efforts, including Mason Tvert from Safer Alternatives for Enjoyable Recreation on the Sensible Colorado campaign. And then on Thursday, we've got Allison Holcomb from the American Civil Liberties Union of Washington's Drug Policy Project and Douglas Hyatt from Sensible Washington to discuss legalization in Washington. And as if that weren't enough, we're also going to end this week with Vivian McPeak, the executive director of Seattle Hemp Fest, will join us on Thursday to close the show and give us a preview of the 3-day 20th anniversary celebration. We'll be there Friday through Sunday, bringing it to you live. We're right back after this with the news.
This is Norml Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
In today's busy world, we're inundated by advertising for all types of pharmaceuticals that come with a laundry list of potential side effects. Shouldn't you have better medical choices? Natural alternatives to pills pushed by Big Pharma? At Alternative Medical Choices, you can choose natural, safe, and effective alternative therapies that are right for your budget without nasty side effects. Cannabis, or marijuana, has been a legal medicine in the Pacific Northwest since 1998. Our doctors will help determine your qualifications for a medical marijuana recommendation in Oregon, no matter where you live. Our massage therapists will ease your aches and stress with soothing hemp seed oil or cannabis-infused massage salves. We also offer acupuncture, Reiki, and other alternative health therapies. Call Alternative Medical Choices in Portland, Oregon at 503-288-5579 or visit our website at www.altmedchoices.com. We specialize in out-of-state recommendations. That's www.altmedchoices.com or call 503-288-5579.
What's up, guys? This is Miss High Times 2007, and you're chilling with us here at the Norml Podcast.
Hey, Tokers, this is Radical Russ encouraging you to check out the great music this summer. And one group you should definitely check out are big supporters of Norml and marijuana legalization, and that's Slightly Stupid. Get all the details online at seedlesssummertour.com. Slightly Stupid. Revolution. Swayze. And Cisco. It's the Stonia show of the summer, coming to Missoula, Boise, Redmond, Washington, Eugene and Jacksonville, Oregon, Lake Tahoe, Berkeley, San Diego, Salt Lake City, Aspen, Denver, Asbury Park, Guilford, New Hampshire, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Baltimore, Charlotte, Cocoa Beach, Boca Raton, St. Augustine, Atlanta, Raleigh, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, Mesa, Arizona, and Irvine, California. Don't miss it. For more details, visit SeedlessSummerTour.com. Seedless Summer Tour is sponsored by Seedless.com, Sector 9, Groove Shark, Revolution Vodka, and Silver Surfer Vaporizers.
James Roquefort here from PeopleRadio.com, and you're listening to Norml, the podcast for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Oh, I didn't know they needed reforming. It's illegal, you say? I'll be right back. Sorry, I had to flush my goldfish down the toilet. What was this about marijuana? Oh well, now on with the show.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Norml News with Cannabis Carrie.
The largest patient group in the state of Maine has secured some big funding this week. Northeast Patients Group plans to open the first dispensary in the state, and with the announcement of the secured financing, they plan on opening their doors within 1 month. Daniel Walker, a Portland, Maine lawyer, has been representing the struggling dispensary group, but he filed documents on August 4th for the Pharmacy Institute for Wellness. NBA basketball player Katino Mobley is one of the financial partners that stepped up and helped the group secure $1.6 million over 8 years of financing with the financial group behind the dispensary, Wellness and Pain Management Connection, LLC. The Pharmacy Institute for Wellness is an offshoot of the pharmacy, which operates 3 dispensaries in California, according to Walker. Joanne LaForce, the director of clinical operations for those dispensaries, says that they will oversee and support and give consulting and related services for the new group in Maine. The dispensary opening in Maine sometime in September will be located in Thomaston, thanks to the new capital they are receiving. State officials inspected a Northeast cultivation site in June with 2 workers who will be part of the new dispensary supply chain. Northeast Patients Group owns the exclusive rights to run half the state's licensed marijuana dispensary, including the state's largest potential markets, Portland, Bangor, and Augusta. But since they were approved in 2010, the organization has struggled to open a single dispensary, and it has dialed back the financial expectations it envisioned in its initial application. In their application, Northeast projected a net gain of more than $426,000 while serving 691 patients in its first full year. But this July, Northeast projected a net loss of more than $1.75 million while only serving 540 patients in its first year. But their projection numbers may change again. The number of patients in the state program has multiplied, far exceeding the state's projections. In March, the state had 773 patients in the state, but by mid-June, that number has jumped to over 1,800 patients that have been approved in the state of Maine.
1,800 patients in Maine. I'm sure there's far, far more people than that in the state that could qualify for medical marijuana. But, you know, it being marijuana and all, some people are a little skittish. But, you know, kudos to Maine to moving forward with dispensary access for patients up there in the Granite State. You know, seems quite sensible. They've realized that, you know, these are legal patients using a legal medicine for them. There ought to be a legal way to get it. What I find interesting about this is the injection of new capital into this industry from outside of the regular, shall we say, activist type background, the grassroots background, so to speak. Now, this story has a bit of a background with his main dispensary group. The Northeast Patients Group was sponsored and founded by the Berkeley Patients Group out of, you know, Berkeley, California, and the folks down there that, you know, were early entrepreneurs in medical marijuana in the 1990s. Now those folks are having to compete with his new money, you know, Catino Mobley, former NBA player, and people that are interested in medical marijuana as a business and not really so much as a legalization or a medicalization or marijuana even in particular. Just the fact that it makes money, and it's something that we're going to have to experience in this industry as we go on, because there's going to be more and more of these venture capitalists that want to get involved that have no idea or no concern about the civil rights part of this issue. So I hope that we can, that those of us in the grassroots can keep our eyes on them and make them understand that this is more than just a money-making venture.
There is one town in America that Rolling Stones has dubbed Stonerville, USA. Nederland, Colorado has enjoyed its reputation of being a green-friendly town for years now, but recent changes in the medical marijuana regulations for Colorado has certainly harshed the mellow for many ganjapreneurs in the last year. Nederland even passed symbolic local legislation in 2010 declaring all marijuana legal in the small mining town where high-grade marijuana is the going commodity. In the town of 1,400 people, the town had permitted 7 medical marijuana stores, but as many as 14 were said to be operating last year. Now, that is 1 for every 100 residents. But not now, as many of those have left, and there are only 3 that remain open. Kathleen Chippy, who runs a local boutique, recently shut down her medical marijuana dispensary and smoking room. She blames the Colorado Department of Revenue for stomping on her constitutional rights in what she says is an intrusive oversight and abusive taxation of marijuana scheme. Over the last 2 years, Colorado has passed landmark legislation to tax and license and govern the state's wildly popular medical marijuana program. Colorado now has the most heavily regulated industry of all the medical marijuana states. Even in Nederland's liberal and free-spirited population, the green rush has touched off some city coffer madness, as the City Board of Trustees has recently imposed a $5,000 local fee on cannabis stores. That, mixed with new regulations that require state licensing fees, costs for setting up video security, and other state mandates, many of the dispensaries in town just shut their doors, unable to come up with the finances to remain open and in compliance. And those renowned growers that were responsible for the kind coming out of Nederland have also been cut off from selling their product to Denver dispensaries. That the dispensaries in Denver, of course, number in the hundreds, and nearby Boulder, since state rules now require stores to grow their own or buy it from a registered commercial center. Several growers known for their carefully culled out super strains who drove their product to Denver are now out of luck. Now, will they stop growing? Seems like for all this regulation, a smaller market like Nederland just went from legal and open back into the murky shadows of the black market once again.
Yeah, and this is the downside of putting marijuana in that medical box, right? We say, oh, it's medicine. Marijuana is medicine. Well, we don't have Jim Bob down the street, you know, cooking up little batches of Prozac and being able to take that down to the Walgreens and sell that, right? You guys wanted medical, right? See, this is the problem. This is why we have to continue to fight for full legalization so that we can utilize this plant in all its forms without over-restrictive regulation. The whole reason why Colorado wants to have this seed-to-sale, full video, super surveillance of everything that's going on is because this market still has to be kept separate from that terrible, dirty, underground black market full of stoners who just want to get high. You know, the criminals out there that we got to lock up and put in prison for using medicine because they're just not sick enough to use it. Well, as long as they have to keep those two things separate, they're going to go to every extent they have to. Seed to sales, you know, tracking every gram, video surveillance, fingerprints, blood supply, firstborn child, whatever it might be. Now, another downside of this, a lot of those growers in Nederland, a lot of these small growers are the best growers of this medicine. This is the problem, right? When you start taking this into the large scale, a large scale grower isn't going to look at this plant versus that plant. This plant needs a couple extra days. That plant needs a couple extra days. This needs a little this. No, man, they're going to go for the big harvest on the big day. We get all their labor there. And if some of the plants are substandard, well, that's just the way it goes, right? But that little grower is able to go, knows each of the plants by name almost and can give all the care that they need and provide the best medicine. This is the downside of medical, is it forces us to have to try to put that, the small grower phenomenon into this medical, where there's lab coats and scientists and researchers and the specifications of exact amounts and standardization of doses and strength. It's not going to work that way. It has to be treated like an agricultural commodity. Now, speaking of an agricultural commodity, let's get to our next story.
In what is believed to be the first such finding in the state, a California judge has ruled that marijuana is not an agricultural crop. Tulare County Superior Court Judge Paul Vortman has dismissed a property owner's court argument that his medical marijuana collective's cultivation on his land is legal since he lives in an agricultural zone. But in his ruling, Judge Vortman wrote that in the state of California, marijuana has never been classified as a crop or horticultural product. The ruling went on to say that marijuana already has a classification, that of controlled substance, adding that, quote, the court finds as a matter of law that growing marijuana is not an agricultural use of property. Now, Tulare County Counsel Kathleen Bales Lang's office sued the property owner and collective on behalf of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. She said that this is the first time a court has addressed whether medical marijuana may be an agricultural crop. The property owner's lawyer said that marijuana plants, although agricultural in nature, acknowledge that even medical marijuana has never been recognized as an agricultural plant. Although we do not have the hard numbers since so much of cannabis is grown illicitly, but it is estimated that marijuana is the nation's top cash crop, with much of it coming from the state of California. A 2006 industry report said that the crop was worth more than $35.8 billion. Now that year, that's more than corn and wheat combined. That number is probably even much larger today, but marijuana is not recognized by the California Department of Food and Agriculture as an agricultural commodity, and no agricultural commissioner in the state lists it in its annual crop reports, something that is required for all 58 commissioners in the state from every county. According to Steve Lyle, the spokesman for the state's agricultural agency, he says that they do not count marijuana as a crop in any reports because it is a law enforcement issue. Now, there is a proposed ballot initiative that does include marijuana to be added as a farming activity, applying existing agricultural taxes and regulations to marijuana, and would prohibit zoning restrictions on cultivation. But for now, in the counties that it is allowed, cultivation of marijuana is usually restricted to commercial zones.
Yeah. All right. What do you got there, son? It's a plant. Let me see here in my book. I got nothing here in my book that says that there's a plant. Well, it's using, photosynthesis to, convert sunlight into energy. It has roots and it takes in water and nutrients like every other plant. No, I'm afraid this is not a horticultural product. This here is a controlled substance, son. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means it's illegal and cannot exist. Well, it's right there. It's growing right there I'm afraid we're going to have to lock you in a box, son. Not an agricultural crop. It's just so maddening because everybody's scrambling here. When we talk about legalization, one of the things that we mention is that there's this big overall support for legalization when you say it in the abstract, right? Should we legalize marijuana? Yeah, 55% say yes. But when you start putting out rules and regulations on it, it starts to drop. I mean, we saw it with Prop 19, right? It dropped about 10 points once you started figuring out what the regs would be, because then some of the supporters go, 18-year-olds should be able to smoke. I'm not going to vote for this. Or, but 5 by 5, that's too small. I'm not going to vote for that, right? So once you start putting some specifics on it, it gets a little dicey. So what's maddening to me is that, we should just go forward with legalization and the criminal penalties, and then we already have agricultural laws. There's already tons of laws on agricultural crops, horticultural products, all sorts of rules and regulations that cover this kind of stuff that, even you may have to be modified somewhat to deal with the specifics of cannabis plants and the fact that it's being used for medicinal purposes in some respects. But still, I can't see why we have to invent a whole new set of laws. And invariably when we do so, when we come up with these whole new sets of regulations for cannabis, they tend to treat it more strictly than they treat it alcohol or even more strictly than they're treating OxyContin in some respects. And that just puts, again, marijuana in a definition that it doesn't belong. The problem that, that all of these stories have in common is that we've got to recognize that marijuana is kind of a unique substance, right? It does have medicinal properties, but it also has recreational properties, and it has industrial properties and all sorts of properties that are good for this planet and good for the people in it. So let's let marijuana just be marijuana and end locking people in cages for it. And I think if we just look to the regulations that we already have in this country for other sorts of agricultural products, we could learn a lot and save ourselves a lot of heartache and trouble. All right, folks, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we got some Roots Monday music for you, going back to the Reefer Jazz era with Cab Calloway and the Reefer Smoking Man. We're back after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support Norml Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would tell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
There is a peaceful solution called a peace revolution. And now let's take back America.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Like millions of freedom-loving Americans, I'm a marijuana smoker, and I don't think that should be any of the government's business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana. The next time you light up, take the time to let your elected officials know how you feel. It's time we legalize marijuana and stop treating marijuana smokers like criminals. For more information on how you can help legalize marijuana, please contact Norml at norml.org.
Hey, this is Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger Seeds, TGAgenetics.com, and you're listening to Norml Show Live.
Marijuana and alcohol are the two most popular recreational drugs in America. Marijuana smoking is non-toxic, relatively safe, and has a low risk of dependence. Alcohol drinking is potentially fatal, dangerous to society, and is quite addictive. Marijuana is safer, so why are we driving people to drink? That's the question of the new book, Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink? By Paul Armentano, Mason Tvert, and Steve Fox. Visit Amazon.com or ChelseaGreen.com today to order your copy of Marijuana is Safer, or visit MarijuanaIsSafer.com.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we bring you tunes for Roots Monday, our celebration of the music that evolved into the popular modern music of today. We pick the best of blues, country, folk, and jazz with a 420 feel and serve it up for you every Monday. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on Norml Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
Hey everybody, this is Canna Bob with another video version of your Roots Monday Toker Tune. Today we've got some Viper music for your Roots Monday. And speaking of Viper music, join me every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time for a new version of the Viper Hour, where we play some of that great old reefer, marijuana, jazz, rhythm and blues music from the 1920s and 30s. That's 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern every Monday here on the Norml Network. Well, today we've got a classic, Mr. Cab Calloway from the 1932 movie The Big Broadcast, singing The Reefer Man. So fire one up and get ready to tap your foot with Cab Calloway on your Roots Monday Toker Tune.
Now with a hidey-hi and a holy-ho, Cab Calloway and his Harlemaniacs present a flaming bit of heated Harlem harmony.
Why, what's the matter, this cat here? What do you mean he's high? reefer man. Oh, that funny, funny, funny reefer man. He smokes a reefer, he gets high, then he flies to the sky. That funny, funny, funny reefer man. Time now, pat that thing slightly, lightly, and politely. Why, that cat's still high. Yeah, man!
It's wonderful.
You want a copy of that song for your iPod? Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.norml.org and choosing Media, and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Yo, what's up? This is Miles from Slightly Stupid. You're listening to Norml Show Live.
Norml Show Live reminds you to never consent to a search. If you're holding and you consent, in most states you will be arrested immediately and you will go to jail. If you don't consent to a search, police may try to intimidate you by threatening to bring in drug-sniffing dogs or try to fool you by saying things will go easier if you consent. Yeah, easier for them, sure. Stand your ground, refuse the search, and ask the officer if you're free to go. If they still detain you and eventually find your contraband, you'll be no more busted than if you had allowed the search. But by refusing the search, your attorney has a chance to win your acquittal before a judge. If you consent to the search, your attorney's hands are tied. You can find a list of Norml Legal Committee attorneys specializing in marijuana cases by visiting the Find a Lawyer link at norml.org. This is Norml Show Live.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years. They've got mandatory sentences, and these judges just say, they throw up their hands and say, there's nothing we can do. There's mandatory sentences. We've got to take a look at what we're considering crimes.
When the Reverend Pat Robertson from television's The 700 Club
criminalizing marijuana, criminalizing the possession of a few ounces of pot and that kind of thing, I mean, it's just
makes more sense on the marijuana issue than the President, the Congress, and the Supreme Court.
It's costing us a fortune, and it's ruining young people. The young people go into prisons, they come out, they go in as youths, and they come out as hardened criminals, and it's not a good thing.
You know we're winning.
Norml, unlike any other marijuana or drug reform organization, is built from the ground up by grassroots activists. We are the Marijuana Smokers Lobby, and we aren't just anti-prohibition, we're pro-marijuana. Every week, we take some time to talk to the citizens of local Norml chapters across the country and around the world, as well as others who are working to make a difference in the fight to end adult marijuana prohibition. In this segment, we call Grassroots Activism.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are so happy to start what we are calling Legalization Week here at Norml Show Live as we lead into Seattle Hemp Fest this weekend. And we're going to start right here in my home state of Oregon, where we have four, maybe more things going on in our initiative system here that have something to do with marijuana, and we're going to talk about most or all of them today. Joining me here in the studio, we have Jennifer Alexander from the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act. She's been a guest on our show before. Welcome back, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Also joining us, and that's your mic, make sure you're close to that, and then also joining us for the first time here in studio, Robert Wolf from the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative. Hi, Robert.
Yeah, good day, and I'm glad to be here.
You know, we've had you on the show before in your role as doing testimony at the State House. We've played a lot of those videos,
Right.
Some of our listeners will be familiar with you from that. So thank you so much with OMPI. And then joining us by telephone later on in this interview segment will be Leland Berger, a Norml Legal Committee attorney who's also working with Sensible Oregon, which is another one of the groups proposing a marijuana measure. I'm going to start this conversation with Robert with OMPI here to talk about the non-legalization proposal. You have a proposal for medical patients, something that has been, vexing us for years here in the community, is trying to get access to the medical patients. So let's tell people about that initiative first.
Yeah, thanks. We do have two measures, and one calls for medical marijuana health centers, avoiding the perhaps controversial term of dispensary, but that's what it means. And the measure is very, very simple. It authorizes or orders the Oregon Health Authority to create these medical marijuana health centers and to take into account all the necessary factors such as geographic distribution, a supply system as well as the distribution system, security for the outlets, and all kinds of other factors. And it was written as simply as possible because I think Measure 74 and the measures before that were all very complex and confusing to voters, and that the complexity also gave our opponents ways to drag us down, ways to talk about something other than the basic question of should there be medical marijuana dispensaries in Oregon. And since the answer to that is obviously yes, I want to give the voters the easiest possible chance to vote yes.
Excellent idea there. Now, with this initiative to have these medical marijuana centers, how would it be run? Is there does that leave it to the state to come up with these, with how they should be run, or is that in the initiative itself?
We punted the whole thing to the Oregon Health Authority because I don't want to pre-decide how the system is going to be run. Instead, I want the voters to have something simple to look at, something simple to say yes to, and I also think that by making the measure very simple, we'll force our opponents to address the question instead of focusing on the details. We're going to put together a committee that will have a full detailed proposal ready so that when we win in November, we can go to the health authority on November 7th and say, now that we've won, here's what we're going to do, and we'll be in a very strong position to come out of the gate with a great detailed proposal.
Do you worry that might be criticized, though, as, we've got the, remember Johnson's secret plan to win Vietnam, right? The secret plan, or was it Nixon, one or the other, but the secret plan here to make these MMCs run, but we won't tell you until it's voted on.
Well, we're not going to tell the Oregon Health Authority until it's voted on, but we're going to have a committee of people from within the community that from all aspects, especially involving the clinics and existing co-ops and dispensary-like units to participate. And it'll be a very open process. Everybody will have a chance to chime in at the health authority through the public participation process. And it is a political decision whether to try to pass something with every question answered up front or to pass something that's easy for the voters to understand and argue about the details later. And I decided, and I think this is true, that our industry is going to have to argue with the regulators all the time, no matter what we pass. So let's pass something simple and get down to the arguing.
It's something that I've been prophesying on this show for many a show, is that we need to force them to address the question first, and then once it's legal, and I'm usually talking with respect to legalization, but it applies here to this dispensary initiative. Once you've got the concept of, yes, this should be allowed and legal, then you're arguing from the position of legality rather than arguing, if you're trying to set the rules now, you are the criminals trying to set the rules.
Our polling shows a 68% approval rate for a simple should there be dispensaries question in Oregon. And if we can win an election with a 68% of the vote, that's going to put us in a very strong place. We'll have a political mandate to go out and do our thing.
And when it comes to these dispensaries, we've seen other states, and I always like to take looks at other states to learn the good and the bad. Colorado's been in the news a lot lately because of this whole, seed to sale, video surveillance super security state.
I don't think they can continue that for too long.
Yeah.
The regulators are going to get tired. The dispensary owners are going to get tired. Everyone's going to get tired of that fast. I don't see that going down the road forever.
Is that so? Do you think then maybe this Colorado experience may be something that we get a chance to learn from as we move on here?
Absolutely. That's the way the revenue department there wrote the rules with the video cameras and the monitoring. it's obviously way too much, way too complex, way too expensive, and we have to avoid that, I think. Record keeping is important, but we certainly don't need that kind of big brother attitude. Look, we're eventually moving towards a place where all adults have relatively free access to cannabis whenever they want it, and the patients have a protected and less expensive way to get the best quality medicine they need. And it's important to realize that we're part of a momentum, a movement, a change that's coming. It's almost overwhelming to see how much positive stuff is happening. In Oregon, I think there's probably 600,000 people that smoke cannabis at least once in a while for some reason. We are the biggest constituency group in the state for any issue whatsoever. We just have to motivate a lot of our fellow cannabis users to get on board, and we can run things politically around here.
And that's why we're having Legalization Week here on Norml Show Live. We're speaking with Robert Wolf from OMPI, the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative. Initiative. Give them a website address if they want to look that up.
OMPIcampaign2012.org.
All right. We're also sitting here with Jennifer Alexander from the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, and joining us by telephone now, Leland Berger, attorney with the Norml Legal Committee and working with Sensible Oregon. Leland, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Greetings from the Downtown Justice Center is what they call it. I prefer to think of it as the Criminal Arts Building or the House of Pain.
The Criminal Arts Building.
Downtown. Well, it is really artsy. It houses the downtown detention center and courtrooms, and I appreciate your having me on the show on behalf of Sensible Oregon.
Well, yes, thank you for calling in. I know you're awfully busy there, and I hope that some justice was served. You're able to have a good day in court today.
Well, here's hoping too. It hasn't quite happened yet. I haven't been in court. Yet either. So I did catch the tail end of what Bob was saying, and I don't know that under any of the three proposals that anybody can guarantee what regulations there will be on the distribution of cannabis. I wanted to make that clear. Basically what legalization supporters are looking at is either a statutory repeal of cultivation and possession and a requirement for regulation for dispensing, which is what Sensible Oregon proposes. A constitutional amendment that would more or less do the same thing, which is what OMPI and its supporters are doing in the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, which is latest incarnation of more complex proposal that, and I'd rather not speak for Jennifer or Paul Stanford or anybody about.
All right, well, let's talk about the Sensible Oregon proposal, because this is the newest one to me. I've been through the OMPI stuff and the OCTA stuff, so tell our listeners what the Sensible Oregon proposal actually is.
Well, sure, I'd be glad to. The Sensible Oregon proposal is a statutory initiative. It's modeled after the Sensible Washington initiative, and for my part, I was inspired by a presentation at the Norml conference here in Portland about a year ago, I think, this fall, where Dick Evans from Northampton, Massachusetts, explained that alcohol prohibition ended when the state refused to enforce the federal law. Functionally, what that means is by not having a state prohibition. And simply, what the Sensible Oregon initiative does is it repeals the prohibition against cultivation and possession for adults 21 or older, and it mandates that the Oregon Health Authority promulgate rules to govern the distribution.
Okay.
That's basically what it is, and it's a pretty simple concept, and we think it would result, in the same kind of benefits that I'm guessing Bob spoke about in terms of the constitutional amendment. But, the difference between a constitutional amendment and a statutory initiative is that a statutory initiative is easier to get on the ballot. It's, in my opinion, more likely to pass. And the downside is that the legislature can repeal it. We had that experience in Oregon where, with the death with dignity, where the legislature repealed it and the people have to vote it in twice.
Right.
But I don't know that that's likely to happen. I mean, there have been efforts or suggestions that if certain things happen, the Medical Marijuana Act would be repealed by the legislature. And I just think this far into it, that's just not likely.
Right. Well, we're speaking with Leland Berger by telephone. He's in court there in Salem and talking about the Sensible Oregon proposal. We had been talking to Robert Wolf about his the dispensary proposal, but that you brought up the legalization proposal. Let's go back to Robert here and talk about your constitutional amendment proposal. And what Lee referred to here is how much more difficult it might be able to get on the ballot.
Well, let me be clear. I'm not supporting a legalization initiative. It's definitely a decriminalization initiative, and it allows the state to set civil penalties once you exceed certain limits that are not defined. Again, this is a very simple two-sentence initiative, or a constitutional amendment proposal that would require the state to eliminate criminal penalties for personal marijuana behavior so that no one goes to jail. I call this a really good first step. And again, the rules will have to be discussed later on if and when the measure passes. We do have to get a lot more signatures, but we see the 2012 election cycle as the best time for a product like this because we'll have more voters overall, way more Democratic voters, thanks to President Obama's anticipated $1 billion campaign to drive the vote out for the Democratic side. And also, as Lee said, we don't want the legislature to mess with it. Once it's in the Constitution, it's likely going to stay there for a long, long time. And the state of Oregon, the cannabis users in the state of Oregon need that kind of protection. There's 600,000 of us at some level, and we need to get the cops off our backs, and no one should be going to jail for nonviolent personal use of marijuana, period, and this would help us get there.
Now, as far as you said something about it not setting a particular limit, but at a certain amount, it would be they could enact civil penalties.
We call it personal use amounts, and those are defined in law now, I believe, as 6 plants and 150 grams of smokable cannabis. And the limits may stay there, or we may have to fight over resetting those limits. But yeah, any personal use amount, and above that, there could be the potential for civil penalties. And of course, if the measure passes, then we'll be going in to argue for the most lenient possible penalties and the greatest possible amounts of personal possession, and arguing against any proposal to punish people severely in a civil thing. But look, right now, if you have an ounce and a gram or 1 plant, you're a felon, and that ruins your life. Every time you apply for a job or housing or date somebody, you got to reveal this horrible piece of information that can screw up your whole life. That's not fair. Look, 600,000 of us use cannabis in Oregon. I think that means it's automatically legal. Is there anything that 600,000 people in Oregon do that should still be illegal?
Yeah, I can't think of anything. Now, as far as the signature requirements, how many signatures do you need for the amendment process?
We're going to need about 118,000 valid signatures, and our proposal calls for collecting between 180 and 200,000 overall signatures.
Okay.
And it's an expensive endeavor. I think it'll take $300,000 to $400,000. We've just launched an in-state fundraising drive at the website. And we have significant proposals in front of a couple of the national drug policy reform groups. And I'll be straightforward, our effort hinges on getting that financing. Either we raise $500,000 in Oregon, or we raise $500,000 outside of Oregon, or some combination. But without that chunk of money, it's going to be hard to take any of this very far. And the fundraising needed to gather signatures sufficient for the ballot is really the issue for all 4 of the initiatives that are currently circulating in Oregon.
All right. Well, let's talk about another initiative. We got Jennifer Alexander here from the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act. It's cannabistaxact.org?
Yes.
Okay. And the Sensible Oregon proposal that Leland Berger is talking about is sensibleoregon.org. So, Jennifer, Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, how is this different from what's being proposed by Sensible Oregon or OMPI?
Well, a couple of the key differences are that we define a regulatory system. We define a regulatory system modeled after alcohol laws in Oregon. And so basically for 21 and over, you'd be able to go into a state licensed store and purchase your cannabis if you so desired. It also does allow for personal use and cultivation, which is a similarity among all 3 of the legalization proposals. The hemp aspects are another big, huge thing about ACTA, and it's one of the main reasons why I'm so passionate about it. I think hemp is a huge economic contributor to our future here. I think that in Oregon especially, hemp has a huge potential to take off. So we are going to legalize hemp for industrial uses as well without a DEA permit, which is what's currently holding up hemp cultivation in Oregon. The 2009 legislature legalized hemp with a DEA permit, but the DEA doesn't give those permits.
Right.
So that those are the main differences. Our proposal also says to give back the tax revenue that's earned from the sale of psychoactive cannabis through those state licensed stores to the state general fund. So we anticipate some revenue coming in through there. It varies in estimates, but using Myron's estimates, we're looking at about $140 million or more in tax revenue for the state of Oregon from the sales of the cannabis alone. Like I said, my economic vision of how Octa saves our economy is not through the cannabis sales, but through the hemp jobs created, industries created. There's so much that can go there, but those would be the key differences, I think.
So unlike the OMP, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Well, I was going to, why don't you let Jennifer finish? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, I was just going to say that unlike the Sensible or the OMPI proposals that are saying we should legalize and then kind of sends it off to the other agencies to set the regulations, Octa is actually writing these regulations within the initiative.
Yes, yeah. One of the things that I've found when I've been out petitioning is that people want to know what we mean by legalization, which I'm sure is why there's been so much discussion in all of the different states about whether or not to legalize. I think the key thing that I've noticed as I'm talking to the public at large is that when I ask them if they want to legalize marijuana, you get a lot of people with that statement. But when you finish and you say, and regulate it like alcohol, I get a lot more people interested. I think that even a lot of the non-cannabis consumers are interested in seeing a regulated market. There's a lot of advantages, which we talk about often on, the cannabis news outlets. There's a lot of advantages to having some regulations involved, and I think most of the non-cannabis users recognize that.
All right. Let's go to Leland on the phone. Did you have a comment you wanted to add?
Well, I have just three things, if I could. First of all, I want to preface what I have to say by saying that I think all three of us would sign each other's initiative. And if only one of these three legalization initiatives were on the ballot, I'm sure all three of us would vote for it. And so far as the dispensary initiative is concerned, there's a deep concern within the community that if it actually gets on the ballot and actually loses for the third time, it's going to set things back tremendously. And so I felt it necessary to share that concern. I think that the Sensible Oregon proposal also addresses the hemp issue, and I think it addresses the regulatory issue in a way, two lawyers, three opinions, and it's certainly a thing Paul Stanford and I have disagreed on over the years. But I think that the proposed regulatory scheme is likely preempted by federal law, and there is no personal use in Oregon law. What there is more and less serious felony crimes. And one of those is if it's 150 grams or more. But there isn't any plant limit that relates to that. And
thank you, Lee.
The main concern I have with the constitutional amendment is that out-of-state funders who hadn't lived here during the campaign on raising the tobacco tax just slightly to try and fund treatment and to make it so that to discourage children from buying tobacco products, lost because it was a constitutional amendment. And I have a deep concern that aversion to amending the Constitution for things other than discriminating against gay people and imposing draconian so-called victims' rights or mandatory minimum sentencing just is not likely to succeed. What I'd like to see, and what I've spoken with both Bob and Jennifer and some of their backers about, is, once we have ballot titles for the three initiatives, polling on all three, and then uniting behind whichever one looks like it's most likely to win.
Well, let me bring those both up first with Bob here. With respect to amending the Constitution, anything response to Oregonians being afraid to do that with marijuana?
It's a higher standard for sure, and I think that they've justifiably been leery of constitutional amendments of all types in the past, and it's a pretty easy argument to say we shouldn't put marijuana in the Constitution. But it's not marijuana, it's civil justice for an amazingly large chunk of our population, which is under threat from the police police for what is a very common behavior and shouldn't be under threat from the police at all. And this is the only way to keep the legislature from messing with it. And we took concepts of several kinds to the National Drug Policy Reform Groups that are the source of most of the money for most of the campaigns in the United States that succeed. And they have a huge well of information, they have a huge well of experience, and they have major funders that can help us. And without money, you can't run a real campaign. And they are interested in the constitutional amendment approach. The two-sentence initiative. Colorado is working on a 72-page initiative right now, and there's stuff going on in Washington and Montana that are lengthy and complex, and we're trying to do the exact opposite, and we've got the attention of the highest-level decision-makers on this, and so I want to give it a try. I want to run with it. My experience on Measure 74 showed that complex measures that take more than 30 seconds to explain are going to get dragged down. I think our two-sentence constitutional amendment is going to go over quite well because it's the best thing for everybody and it's easy to understand.
Okay. This is something I've covered before on the show, the idea of there being multiple different initiatives that are kind of, fishing from the same pool of donors and, volunteer signature gatherers and people willing to sign petitions, the potential for there being confusion among the voters. Did I sign this one? Did I sign that one? Which marijuana thing did I sign? Jennifer, with respect to that, what do you think about Leland's proposal here about polling these ballot titles and putting all the effort into one?
In all honesty, for me personally, and Lee has a lot more experience than I do in cannabis activism. I mean, I definitely want to note that. So I trust that his experience is probably valid. But at the same time, I feel like putting all of our efforts into one initiative is much more risky than multiple initiatives. Now, on the downside, there are 3 or 4, if you include the dispensary and proposal, that are, like you said, kind of fishing through the same barrel for fundraising. But I think that there's a lot more people out there and a lot smaller criteria for what needs accomplished, so that we aren't necessarily needing the exact same. Like, I don't need you personally to sign all 3 initiatives to ensure that they make the ballot, as nice as that would be. And as likely as it is that multiple people will sign multiple initiatives, realistically, we could all get independent signatures, and total them all up and still have plenty of people that would sign our ballot. If this issue is as popular as I believe it is, and most of us, I think, agree it is, there are plenty of people that use cannabis that support changing the laws, and in my experience, there's plenty of people that don't use cannabis that support changing the laws. So I feel like there's cooperation that we can do together, in supporting each other's efforts, because ultimately we're all fighting for the same thing, which is to end prohibition. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that we have to compete with each other over who's going to sign whose petition or who's going to fund whose petition. I think that we can work together to get them all on the ballot and let the voters pick the one in that way. I think that a poll can be sometimes unreliable, and I think that if we were to discard the various choices, that we might end up not getting anything. If we put all of these forward, if any one of them stalls out along the process, that would be unfortunate, and it would eliminate some of the mutual need. But at the same time, I think that we can all work together and all make the ballot, all cross-support each other and all vote for all 3 of them. And then that makes such a loud statement to our state and our federal government. And ultimately, I think it would be more difficult for them to undo it if we can work together and get all 3 of them passed.
And Bob, same question to you as far as, do you see a problem with there being multiple initiatives, or is it kind of inevitable and you work with what you get?
I think it's inevitable. I put out some considerable effort to get everyone to follow me, sort of, but people have their own ideas and their own initiatives. I do think that many initiatives gathering signatures and potentially 4 questions on the ballot regarding cannabis means that people will get an impression that this issue is so important and that the time to make a decision is so imminent that they'll realize that they've got to pick one and go with it, or pick them all and go with it. And if we pass them all and there's some conflict, I'm happy to go argue about that all day too. That would be a dream scenario. Yes. But in the meantime, we've got a continuum of proposals, and people can bite off as big a chunk of marijuana reform as they're comfortable with.
All right, Leland?
I was going to say I want some of what Jen and Bob's been smoking, because the only thing free initiatives all pulling on more or less or gathering signatures on more or less the same issue does is make it less likely that anybody's going to get on the ballot.
Gotta stay positive.
The flip side, though, is that, I've been involved in marijuana politics here in Oregon for 15 years or so, and things seem more unified and more friendly this time than they have in election cycles past. So that at least insofar as the volunteer efforts are concerned, the various organizations statewide are, for the most part, circulating and gathering signatures on all three issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as Russ knows, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's a real rarity in any state, or certainly, at the national level in terms of the various drug policy organizations that Bob was speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's play dream scenario here, Leland, and say they all made the ballot and all passed. Legally, what happens in that situation?
No, that's a good question. I think that the repeal of prohibition for adults for cultivation and possession would be protected both statutorily and constitutionally under Sensible Oregon's proposal and under OMPI's proposal. And again, if it survived a preemption challenge, then cannabis would be regulated by, in the manner that OCTA prescribed, or the legislature would, since both OCTA and Sensible Oregon are statutory provisions, the legislature would, do something.
Yeah.
They would to try and meld the two and make them workable.
Yeah, that's the kind of problem I wish we could have in 2012 to try to figure out which.
Well, I have to tell you that we have we have problems in Oregon that other people wish they had problems with. I had a situation last week with a guy who had a large garden here in Portland in the city, and it was bothering the neighbors, and I posted on the Norml legal committee list about, has anybody else run into this problem? And a guy in Kansas wrote back, we wish we had those problems.
Well, hey, folks, we got to wind up the show here, so I'm going to give about 15 seconds to each person. We'll start with Robert Wolf. Tell them your website and how to get a hold of you and all the stuff they need to know.
The Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative is supported by about 28 groups now, and we're at OMPI campaign 2012.org. And the best thing you can do is sign all the petitions and give some money.
All right. Jennifer Alexander?
Oregon Cannabis Tax Act is cannabistaxact.org, and same thing. Join the volunteer effort, donate money, get involved with all of them if you can. Sign them all and vote for them all.
All right, and Leland Berger.
On Sensible Oregon, we're as you mentioned, Russ, at sensibleoregon.org. We are still gathering signatures, although we're substantially towards the 1,000 you need to get a ballot title. And if people want to help with that effort, they can pick up petitions at the Cannabis Cafe on Southeast 82nd Avenue.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us here. Our guests in the studio, Robert Wolf from OMPI, Jennifer Alexander from OCTA 2012, and by telephone, Leland Berger from a courtroom down there in Salem. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of our Legalization Week. All right, when we come back, Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio will be hanging out here taking your calls at 971-533-7111. We're looking for a call back from Wiz Khalico and Ganja John for their little adventure with the Roseburg Police Department last night. So for Cannabis Carry, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, Tokers. And make sure to tune in tomorrow, Tuesday. We have Dale Sky Jones from Oaksterdam University on legalization in California. Mason Tavert on Wednesday, legalization in Colorado. And on Thursday, Allison Holcomb and Doug Hyatt with legalization in Washington. Take it easy.
This is Norml Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.